Hello dear aspirants, I am your Srinivas sir and today I am going to talk about the literary form related to poetry, that is elegy. So elegy is one of the topics that was asked in the competitive examinations. So here we are going to have a thorough understanding of the concept of elegy. సో మరి పీజీటీ టీజీటీ లాంటి ఎగ్జామినేషన్స్లో అండ్ ఈవెన్ జూనియర్ లెక్చరర్ ఎగ్జామినేషన్స్లో స్కూల్ అసిస్టెంట్ ఇంగ్లీష్ ఎగ్జామినేషన్లో చాలా కామన్గా అడిగేటువంటి కాన్సెప్ట్ ఎలిజీకి సంబంధించినటువంటి ప్రశ్నలు ఉంటాయి. సో లెట్ us see what an elegy is and what are the variants of elegy and what are the characteristics of elegy. And the fourth one is what are the great elegies in English literature. These are the points we are going to discuss as a part of today's class. So first we will begin with the introduction to the concept of elegy. Then we will talk about the variants of elegy. Third one, characteristics of elegy. Fourth one is the famous and well-known elegies in English literature. So when we learn these four things, definitely we will be able to answer good number of questions in the examination. So let us get started with the concept of elegy. So elegy ante ento munduga manam discuss cheddam. So elegy is a meditative lyric poem. So dear aspirants, remember what an elegy is. An elegy is a meditative lyric poem. Meditative lyric poem lamenting the death of a public personage or a friend or a loved one. Okay, so this is a meditative, plaintive, melancholic, sorrowful song or poem that laments the death of a distinguished or a public personage or the death of a friend or the death of a loved one. So sometimes, usually before this particular thing, before 17th century in English literature, elegies were also written on the loss of something. For example, when they lost something in their personal life, like the failure of a love, so that was also one of the themes under these elegies. But now at present we need to remember the elegy as the song of lamentation over the death of a near one, over the death of a person, right? This is the simple definition that can be given. So as a part of this thing, we need to understand three things. One is elegy is a lyric poem. Elegy is a lyric poem. It is a song of lamentation. It is a song of lamentation and it deals with the theme of death. It deals with the theme of death. These are the three things, three basic things. And fourth thing is that it is meditative, it is melancholic, it is plaintive and it is sorrowful in tone. These 4 points are to be remembered as a basic definition to the concept of elegy. Okay, now let us look at the background of this elegy. Originally, the elegies deal with the theme of mourning, sorrow and lamentation. Okay, what were the common themes in elegies? The common themes in elegies were mourning, second one sorrow, third one lamentation. And the word elegy was derived from the Greek word that is elegia. The meaning of this Greek term elegia is to lament or to be sorrowful. So the term elegy was derived from the Greek word elegia and the meaning of the term elegia was to lament or to be sorrowful. Okay, and in Greek and Roman literature, any poem that was written in elegiac meter, any poem that was written in elegiac meter was considered an elegy. So Greek and రోమన్ లిటరేచర్లో ఎలిజియాక్ మీటర్లో రాసినటువంటి ఏ పోయం అయినా కూడా ఎలిజీగా కన్సిడర్ చేయబడేది. ఓకే, సో దట్ వాజ్ ఇన్ ద గ్రీక్ అండ్ రోమన్ లిటరేచర్. Then what is elegiac meter? So we discussed this while we were discussing the concept of meters. So we discussed several types of meters and foot in the earlier classes, and here elegiac meter is a meter that contains irregular hexameter and pentameter, which was written using dactylic foot. Okay, so the meter that contains irregular hexameter and pentameter in dactylic hexameter, dactylic pentameter was the meter that is used in elegiac meter. So మనం ఇవన్నీ కూడా చెప్పుకున్నాము, different kinds of foot and also meter, like iambus noun and the iambic adjective form, and anapest anapestic, dactyl dactylic, and trochaic spondaic. These 5 types of feet were discussed in the earlier classes, and we also talked about the different types of meters. So this meter and the foot which help or which bring rhythm to a language, rhythm to poetry, these things were discussed in the earlier classes. But now here remember, in Greek and Roman literature, any poem that was written using written using elegiac meter రాసిన ఏ పోయం అయినా కూడా ఓకే దాన్ని ఎలిజీగా కన్సిడర్ చేసేవాళ్ళు. మరి ఎలిజియాక్ మీటర్ అంటే కూడా గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి, వాట్ ఈజ్ ఎలిజియాక్ మీటర్ మీన్స్ the poem which was written using dactylic hexameter and dactylic pentameter. Irregular dactylic hexameter and dactylic pentameter is considered the elegiac meter. Adi elegiac meter avutundi. And here the subject matter of elegies during that Greek and Roman literature was conversion and loss. These two used to be the themes or the subject matters of the Greek and Roman elegies. So Greek and Roman elegies lo subject matters emtante gurtupetukondi, conversion used to be the first theme and loss used to be the second theme and second subject matter. And all the poems, all the elegies during this Greek and Roman literature are based on the theme of love. Okay, this is the background of the concept of elegies. Okay, and now let us look at the remaining things about the concept of elegy when it was brought into Europe, especially into England. There were different themes, there were several themes for this particular elegies. Okay, and especially during the Renaissance period, elegies were written with variant themes. Different kinds of themes were there in elegies. For example, if you look at the elegies written by John Donne, the elegies were written by John Donne were based on the themes of love. So love yoka theme paina undi. Some elegies were written on the loss of human values, and during the same period some elegies were written on the loss of religion, etc. So several themes were there during the Renaissance period. But during the 17th century, a formal and sustained lamentation of verse was given to elegies, that was on the demise of a specific individual. Okay, so the elegies were written in 17th century in England. The theme was the demise of an individual, on the death of an individual. So ఒక ఇండివిజువల్ పర్సన్ చనిపోయినప్పుడు రాసినటువంటి థీమ్ 17th century నుండి స్టార్ట్ అయిందని చెప్పుకోవచ్చు. సో ద ప్రాపర్ థీమ్ for this particular elegy, the formal theme for the elegy was lamentation on the death of a person from 17th century. 17th century నుండి స్టార్ట్ అయిందని మనం చెప్పుకుంటాము. సో దిస్ ఈజ్ ఆల్ ద ఇంట్రొడక్షన్ అండ్ బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ టు ద కాన్సెప్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద ఎలిజీ. ఇది ఎలిజీకి సంబంధించినటువంటి ఇంట్రొడక్షన్ అండ్ ఆల్సో ద బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్. Okay, dear aspirants, you need to remember a few points. Let us try to recollect them. First one is, an elegy is a poem of lamentation. It is a lyric poem, and this poem is meditative, melancholic, plaintive, and also sorrowful, and it usually deals with the theme of death. Deals with the theme of death. And during the Greek and Roman literature, elegies were written in elegiac meter on any theme, and also the subject matter used to be conversion and loss. And during the Renaissance period, when elegies were brought into English literature, especially in the Renaissance period, there were many themes for the elegies, and one such theme is love. Okay, and during the 17th century, proper theme was attributed to the elegies. That was, elegies were written on the death of a person. Okay, so this is all about the kind of the thing that we need to understand. Right, usually in an elegy there were 3 stages. An elegiac poem was written using 3 stages. 3 stages were there. That poem begins with the grief. Okay, every elegy begins with a grief, and after the grief comes the second stage, that is the praise of the dead. So the characteristics or the great deeds of the deceased were appreciated in the second part. And the third one is consolation towards the last. Consolation towards the last. Just you imagine the poem, that is Home They Brought Her Warrior Dead, which was written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. If you look at that particular poem, that poem begins with a grief. Okay, the grief of the wife was described in the first stanza. And after that, the second stanza talks about the praise of the dead, praise of the dead warrior. Okay, truest friend and noblest foe, truest friend and noblest foe, that dead was appreciated or praised. And the third one is consolation towards the last. That was the third one, and in the same poem you can find the consolation even. So in this manner, there was a proper structure for an elegy, and there were three stages in the elegy. Elegies lo manaku three stages untai. Okati grief, rendavadi praise of the dead, and third one enti the consolation towards the last. These are the three stages that can be found in an elegy. Elegies lo ఉన్నటువంటి మూడు parts గా మనం చెప్పుకుంటూ ఉంటాము, right? There are several variants for the elegy. Elegies lo మరి చాలా variants ఉంటాయి, and especially the popular two variants are the dirge and pastoral elegy. Dirge and pastoral elegy are two important variants of elegy, and as a part of this class we also discuss the concept of dirge and also the pastoral elegy. ఈ రెండిటి గురించి కూడా మనం డిస్కస్ చేస్తుంటాము, right? So here the dirge is also a sad song or a poem. Okay, it is also a sad song that exhibits the sorrow on the event of the death of someone in particular, right? So it is also a sad song, and it was also written on the death of a person. But what is the difference between dirge and elegy? మరి రెండిటికి వేరియేషన్ ఏంటంటే dirge is less formal, but elegy is more formal. సో ఫార్మల్గా తీసుకున్నప్పుడు elegy is formal, whereas dirge is less formal. And even in size also, elegy is longer than a dirge. Okay, elegy అనేది they are lengthy compared to the dirge. So slightly different from the elegy in terms of being short. So dirges are short, less formal. They are less formal and generally characterized as, okay, usually they are characterized as a text to be presented in the form of a song. ఇవి ఎప్పుడు కూడా పోమ్గా కాదు, సాంగ్ లాగా ఇవి ప్రజెంట్ చేయబడతాయి. సో ఎలిజీస్ ఆర్ పోమ్స్, whereas dirges are the songs. They are presented in the form of the song. So what are the three differences between the elegy and dirge? Elegy ki dirge ki rendu kuda songs of lamentations, a poem of lamentations. But enti kada ante elegies are formal, dirges are less formal. Elegies are long, dirges are short. Elegy is a poem, and this dirge is presented in the form of a song. These are the differences between the elegy and dirge. ఇవి రెండింటికి మధ్యలో ఉన్నటువంటి డిఫరెన్సెస్గా తెలుసుకోవచ్చు. If you look at the famous dirges, that first one is William Shakespeare's Full Fathom 5 Thy Father Lies. This is one of the famous examples and well-known examples for the dirges written by William Shakespeare. And second one is William Collins. Okay, William Collins, which is a song from Shakespeare's Cymbeline, which was written in 1749. ఇది కూడా మనకి డర్జ్కి ఒక ఎగ్జాంపుల్గా చెప్పుకోవచ్చు. విలియం కాలిన్స్, ఏ సాంగ్ ఫ్రమ్ షేక్స్పియర్స్ సింబలిన్ ఈజ్ ఆల్సో అన్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఫర్ ద డర్జ్. సో దిస్ ఈజ్ వన్ ఆఫ్ ద వేరియంట్స్ ఆఫ్ ఎలిజీ. ఎలిజీలో ఉన్నటువంటి ఒక వెరైటీగా చెప్పుకోవచ్చు. అండ్ డియర్ ఆస్పిరెంట్స్, రిమెంబర్, యూజువల్లీ ఎలిజీస్ ఆర్ ఆఫ్ టూ టైప్స్. They lament two kinds of things. What are those two kinds of things? ఏంటవి మరి? They are personal elegies. Second one is impersonal elegies. Personal and impersonal elegies. These are the two types of elegies that are found in English literature. Okay, how many types of elegies are there? Two types of elegies are there. What is the first elegy? One is the personal elegy, and what is the second one? That is the impersonal elegy. Personal elegy and impersonal elegy. Personal elegy laments the death of a specific individual. For example, if you look at many elegies, just remember In Memoriam by Alfred Lord Tennyson, In Memoriam AHH. So that elegy was written by Tennyson in memory of his friend, on the death of his friend Arthur Henry Hallam. So here in this elegy, he is lamenting the death of an individual, that is his friend. So that kind of elegy is an example for the personal elegy. Okay, personal elegy. Even Milton laments the death of his friend Edward King in Lycidas. That Lycidas is also a personal elegy where he laments the death of an individual. Okay, so that is the first type of elegy, personal elegy, which was written on the death of an individual. Oka person chanipoyinappudu rasetuvanti. But an impersonal elegy is an elegy which grieves over human nature, destiny, human destiny or human conditions. Okay, it is not one particular individual. Okay, not one particular individual. It may be the human nature, it may be the human destiny, it may be the human conditions. Ivannitipai rasedi impersonal elegy ga cheppochu. For example, the elegy written by Thomas Gray, that is elegy written in the country churchyard. In that he grieves not the death of an individual, he grieves the sufferings of the people in general. So that is an example for the impersonal elegy. Adi impersonal elegy ki udaharanaga cheppochu. These are the two types of elegies. Okay, what is the first one? That is personal elegy. And what is the second one? That is an impersonal elegy. Personal and impersonal elegy. Right, dear aspirants, I think you all understand what is being expressed here. And we need to know about one more variant of elegy. Elegy lo inko variant gurinchi cheppukovali manam. That is the pastoral elegy. One of the major variants of elegies is the pastoral elegy. Now let us learn what that pastoral elegy is. A pastoral elegy ento మనం ఇప్పుడు డిస్కస్ చేద్దాం. So the word pastoral was derived from the Greek word pastor. సో పాస్టర్ అనేటువంటి గ్రీక్ వర్డ్ నుండి పాస్టోరల్ అనే వర్డ్ తీసుకోబడింది. అండ్ దిస్ పాస్టోరల్ మీన్స్ టు గ్రేజ్. సో ఇట్ ఈస్ రిలేటెడ్ టు ద ఐడిలిక్ విలేజ్ సీన్ ఆర్ ఇట్ ఈస్ అగెన్స్ట్ ద టౌన్. ఓకే, అగెన్స్ట్ ద టౌన్ లైఫ్ we can say. So then what is a pastoral elegy? Pastoral elegy is an elegy in which the poet represents himself as a shepherd. Okay, pastoral elegy is an elegy in which the poet represents himself as a shepherd and he laments on the death of a fellow shepherd. Okay, he portrays himself as a shepherd and he laments over the death of a fellow shepherd. That kind of elegy is known as the pastoral elegy. Pastoral elegy. And these pastoral elegies were initiated by the Sicilian Greek poet Theocritus. Okay, Theocritus initiated this particular pastoral elegy, who was the Sicilian school of poets, Sicilian Greek poets, and later this form was carried out by the Roman Virgil. Okay, Virgil carried on this with this what form of pastoral elegy. So initiated by Theocritus and then continued by Virgil. Okay, this is also to be remembered when it comes to the pastoral elegy. Mari pastoral elegy విషయానికి వచ్చినప్పుడు మనం ఈ విషయాన్ని కూడా గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాలి. Okay, dear friends, and this is an advancement in European countries during the Renaissance. Many European countries practiced this form of the pastoral elegy, and also it was popular during the 19th century. So 19th century lo kuda chala popular poem ga cheppochu. That is the pastoral elegy. Then what are the characteristics of this elegy? What are the characteristics of the pastoral elegy? Pastoral elegy kunnatvanti features ni manam ippudu discuss cheddam. Right. So the pastoral elegies are usually set in rural settings. Okay, rural settings lo untayi ivanni kuda. Okay, they are set in rural settings and they can be set outdoors in a beautiful summery landscape. The scenery is a beautiful scenery and it is a summer landscape. And the characters that involve in this pastoral elegy are shepherds. The poet himself is a shepherd and the other characters in the elegy are also portrayed as shepherds. Then they idealize or sentimentalize their settings. Even they not only lament on the death of the person, they also glorify the beauty of the nature and the surroundings. and they also idealize the characters that are there. So these are the features of this pastoral elegy, and the best examples for the pastoral elegy are Milton's Lycidas. Okay, Milton's Lycidas is an example for the concept of this particular pastoral elegy, and Shelley's Adonais, which was written on the death of the fellow poet John Keats, that was also an example for the pastoral elegy. And even Matthew Arnold's Thyrsis is also an example for the pastoral elegy, and these three are the best examples for the pastoral elegy. Okay, dear friends, this is all about the concept of pastoral elegy. Okay, so Milton's Lycidas and Shelley's the Adonais and Matthew Arnold's Thyrsis. These three are said to be the best examples for pastoral elegy. As a part of the class, we discussed two variants of elegy. One is dirge and second one is pastoral elegy. And now, dear aspirants, now we are going to talk about the characteristics of an elegy. Elegy కుండేటువంటి characteristics ని గురించి మనం ఇప్పుడు డీటెయిల్ గా డిస్కస్ చేద్దాం. So elegy is a lyric poem. We all know elegy is a lyric poem. This is nothing but the summarizing or consolidating what has been learned so far. ఇప్పటి వరకు మనం నేర్చుకున్నటువంటి మొత్తం విషయాల్ని ఎలిజీకి సంబంధించి ఇక్కడ కన్సాలిడేట్ చేస్తున్నాము, అండ్ వి గేవ్ ద టైటిల్ దట్ ఈస్ క్యారెక్టరిస్టిక్స్. ఓకే, సో ఎన్ ఎలిజీ ఈజ్ ఏ లిరిక్ పోయం. దిస్ లిరిక్ పోయం ఫోకసెస్ ఆన్ ద expression of emotions and thoughts. We said this is meditative. This is meditative, where the poet expresses his emotions and thoughts. That's the first one, lyric poem. And it uses formal language and structure. The language is formal, even the structure, grief, praise, consolation. Grief, first part, praise, second part, consolation, third part. That proper structure is there. Okay, so formal language is there, proper structure is there for any elegy. And this is solemn, and this is even melancholic in tone. The tone of this poem is solemn, which is serious, and also melancholic. And this is meditative, plaintive, or we can say sorrowful. Meditative, plaintive or sorrowful. That is the nature of this particular elegy. Elegy kunnatvanti konni features. Let us talk about the next features. The elegy may lament over the loss of a person, over the death of a person, or the loss of beauty, or even something or someone the speaker held dear. So adi evaraina kavachandi. It may be a person, it may be a thing, it may be beauty, or it may be any other thing or any other person. Okay, that is the first quality. For example, if you look at the Seafarer, which was translated by Burton Raphael, the days are gone when the kingdoms of earth flourished in glory. Here the poet is talking about the days are gone. He is talking about the loss of beauty. Loss of beauty gurinchi maatladutunnadu. So the days are gone when the kingdoms of earth flourished in glory. Now there are no rulers, no emperors, no givers of gold as once there were, when wonderful things were worked among them, and they lived in lordly magnificence. Those past have vanished, those pleasures are dead. So he is talking about something that has been lost. Something that has been lost was lamented in this one. So this is one of the important features of this elegy, which laments over the death of someone or loss of something. Right. Look at the next feature, that is an elegy explores profound questions about the nature of life and death, the questions about the immortality of the soul. The poet asks questions. The questions are on the nature of life and death. Nature of life and death కి సంబంధించిన questions అడుగుతాడు. The poet also asks the questions on the immortality of the soul. If you look at the In Memoriam AHH, Arthur Henry Hallam పైన రాసిన In Memoriam లో లార్డ్ టెనిసన్ ఏం చెప్తున్నాడు? Okay, our God and nature then at strife, that nature lends such evil dreams. So careful of the type she seems, so careless of the single life. He is asking questions about life and death. He is asking questions about life and death, and this is one of the features. Okay, and look at the next one. An elegy expresses the speaker's anger towards death. The poet expresses wrath or anger towards death, and it also expresses the resistance to its inevitability. Inevitability of death is also resisted in this particular one. O life as futile, then as frail. Oh, for thy voice to soothe and bless, what hope of answer or redress behind the wheel, behind the wheel. This was said by Alfred Lord Tennyson in the poem In Memoriam. He is asking, he is expressing his anger about death. The poet is expressing his anger about death, and he is also expressing resistance to its inevitability. This is another feature of the death. And here one more point we need to discuss about the characteristic is, it begins with a lament of loss of life or a person or loss of thing, that is we all know, and sorrow is followed by the praising for the dead. The good qualities and the good deeds of the deceased are what praised or appreciated after the grief. And then sometimes also Elegy also express speakers resentment or rage or anger about the loss or the demise. Okay, and then the last and third stage of the elegy is the consolation. Consolation is the third part and the last part of an elegy. So far we discussed the structure of an elegy, and this element may be more religious. The consolidation or the consolation may be religious in nature, and this is of the concept, that is the features of the elegies. Okay, dear aspirants, now we have come to the final part of this video where we are going to discuss the great elegies in English literature. So English literature ఉన్నటువంటి great elegies గురించి మనం డిస్కస్ చేద్దాం. So here the very first one that we need to talk about when it comes to the elegies and its types is In Memory of W.B. Yeats. Okay, In Memory of W.B. Yeats is the concept. The poem elegy written by W.H. Auden. Okay, W.H. Auden wrote this elegy, and it was written on the death of the W.B. Yeats. It was written in the memory of W.B. Yeats, and it was written in 1940. Okay, this is the first famous elegy, In Memory of W.B. Yeats, written by W.H. Auden. The second one is O Captain, My Captain, written by Walt Whitman on the death of American President Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln's death was lamented in the poem O Captain, My Captain, which was written by Walt Whitman in 1865. And another important elegy that can be noted down is Emily Dickinson's Because I Could Not Stop for Death. Okay, Because I Could Not Stop for Death is also one more elegy, and that was written by Emily Dickinson, and it was on the theme of death. No particular person is lamented. So this is one more elegy. Lycidas, a pastoral elegy, was written by John Milton. Okay, John Milton wrote the Lycidas, and that is an example for pastoral elegy, and it was written on the death of Edward King, who is a friend of Milton at Cambridge. Okay, and then In Memoriam, Arthur Henry Hallam, his friend, Alfred Lord Tennyson wrote on the death of his friend at Cambridge, that is Arthur Henry Hallam, and it can said to be the greatest poem of 19th century. So 19th century lone mottam literature lo greatest poem ga mana dinni chepkochu, that is In Memoriam. So one more elegy which was written by P.B. Shelley is the Adonais, which is considered the pastoral elegy. Okay, pastoral elegy which was written by P.B. Shelley, that is Adonais, and it laments the death of the fellow poet John Keats. It laments the death of John Keats, and this poem was published in 1821. And another pastoral elegy is Thyrsis. Okay, Thyrsis was another pastoral elegy, and it was written by the poet Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold wrote the poem Thyrsis, and it laments the death of Arthur Hugh Clough. A.H. Clough, we say A.H. Clough, and to commemorate the poet friend, he wrote the poem that is Thyrsis, and this poem was published in 1865. 1865 lo published cheyabadindi. This is also an example for the pastoral elegy. And Ovid wrote one more elegy that is known as Amors, and then Thomas Gray's elegy written in the country churchyard. Elegy written in the country churchyard, it is an impersonal elegy. Impersonal elegy ga cheppuntamu. So it was specifically written for Richard West, but in general, this was written on the sufferings of the humankind, on the death of the mankind. So, elegy written in the country churchyard. Then Edmund Spenser wrote one more elegy, that is Astrophel. Astrophel is one more elegy written by Edmund Spenser on the death of Sir Philip Sidney. Okay, to lament on the death of Sir Philip Sidney, Edmund Spenser wrote one elegy, and that's name is Astrophel. And Matthew Arnold's one more elegy is Rugby Chapel. Rugby Chapel is another elegy. And Edmund Spenser wrote, Matthew Arnold wrote this Rugby Chapel on the death of his father Thomas Arnold. So when he visited the tomb of his father after 15 years of his father's death, he wrote one elegy in memory of his father Thomas Arnold, and thus that elegy is known as Rugby Chapel. And Matthew Arnold wrote one more poem, that is Memorial Verses. Memorial Verses was written by him, and that is on the death of William Wordsworth. Okay, on the death of William Wordsworth, Matthew Arnold wrote one elegy, and that elegy is Memorial Verses. Memorial Verses was that elegy. And then Thomas Gray's elegy written in the country churchyard, I have told you, it is an example for the impersonal elegy, and that elegy laments the concept of death as a whole. Not one particular person, it laments the death as a whole, and it including fear of death and its inevitability. Fear of death and its inevitability. And the same is written in Emily Dickinson's Because I Could Not Stop for Death. That is also fear of death and the inevitability of death. So rendu kuda impersonal elegies avutayi gurtupetukondi. And here one more thing, a satirical elegy on the death of late famous general, which was written by Jonathan Swift. This is also an elegy, but it is a satirical elegy. Satirical elegy. So this is about the concept of famous elegies in English literature. Ivi English literature famous elegy ga chepkochu. So dear aspirants, such kind of questions are expected in the examination. So we should learn all those things here. And here questions may come on the general introduction and also the historical background of elegy. Second one is the variants of elegy. Third one is on the characteristics or features of an elegy. And the fourth one is the important or well-known elegies in English literature. So if we cover these 4 points, definitely we will be able to get a mark in the examination and we will be able to answer this question. I hope all of you have understood this concept, and this is all about the elegy, and thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.